Title: The Tenant, the Trash Bags, and the Tangled Web of Deceit. The gavel cracked. A sharp, authoritative sound that sliced through the charged atmosphere of the television studio. A sound that promised order, but heralded a storm. All eyes were on Judge Judy, a figure of unwavering scrutiny perched behind the bench, her gaze fixed on the young woman standing before her. This was not just a case. It was a powder keg of accusation, desperation, and two wildly conflicting stories about a failed living situation that had exploded into a maelstrom of police involvement, alleged drug sales, and stolen furniture. The plaintiff, Becca Seidel, a woman whose face was a canvas of strained resilience, was there to reclaim what she said was rightfully hers, a security deposit and the essential furnishings for a family home. Arrayed against her were the defendants, Chloe and Brandon Miller, a couple whose crossed arms and set jaws projected an aura of defensive indignation. The hook was set. This was a story of a simple rental agreement that had spiraled into a domestic nightmare, and everyone in the room, and everyone watching at home, was about to be dragged into its unsettling depths. Judge Judy began, her voice a calibrated instrument of clarity and skepticism. This case involves your request for the return of your security deposit and furniture that you allege the defendants have that belong to you. She then pivoted, delivering the Millers' counter-narrative with surgical precision. The defendants say that you moved in with no furniture, with bags of clothes in garbage bags, so that there's no furniture that belongs to you, and that you paid no security or rent. The fundamental question hung in the air, thick and heavy. Who was telling the truth? Was Becca Seidel a victim of ruthless opportunists, or was she a fabricator, weaving a tapestry of lies from the threads of a chaotic life? The journey to the answer would be anything but straightforward. Now, how long did you live with them? Judge Judy inquired, her eyes narrowing, already probing for the first inconsistency. Becca Seidel, her voice trembling with a mixture of nerves and conviction, replied, "Roughly 4 weeks. 4 weeks. A mere month, yet in that sliver of time, a lifetime of drama had apparently unfolded. A domestic pressure cooker that had finally blown its lid. To understand the present, one had to delve into the past. Judge Judy expertly began to construct the timeline, peeling back the layers of Becca's life. Just prior to moving in with them, with whom were you living? The question was simple, but the answer would reveal the vulnerability that led her to the Miller's doorstep. "I was living with my husband and my 3 children," Becca stated, painting a picture of a complete, if struggling, family unit. "Where?" pressed Judge Judy, not allowing any detail to remain vague. "In a house that my mother and my stepfather owned and put up on the market in April of 2014. The reason for her move was becoming clear. The solid ground beneath her family was shifting. She had lived there for 2 years, a period of stability that was now ending. And so the reason that you needed a place to live was because the house was sold?" Judge Judy clarified. Becca expanded, her words tumbling out as she sought to justify her decision. "We were living there while they were fixing it up to sell, and we had reached the end of the renovations. So it was time to put it on the market. They did not give us a time that we had to move out, but I found this place for half the amount that we were paying. So I opted to move out, and it seemed like a good idea at the time." Ah, that fatal phrase. It seemed like a good idea at the time. How many catastrophes are born from such reasonable, hopeful beginnings? The lure of cheaper rent, the promise of a fresh start, had blinded her to the potential dangers that lurked behind a seemingly friendly Facebook offer. The date of May 8th was etched into Becca's memory, the day hope turned into hardship. "And you moved all your belongings in?" Judge Judy asked, zeroing in on the heart of the dispute. "Yes, Your Honor," Becca affirmed, her voice gaining strength as she listed the inventory of her former life. "We moved in with my 4-year-old's twin bed, our queen-sized bed, a full-size bed, my daughter's pack and play, a crib for her, and a kitchen table, dishes. These were not just objects. They were the building blocks of a home, the beds where her children dreamed, the table where they shared meals. The image she painted was one of a fully furnished family, transporting their life into a new space. Judge Judy, ever the detective, wanted to know the mechanics of this move. And who moved the property in from your mother's residence into the defendant's residence? "My husband and my brother," Becca answered, providing witnesses, a team of movers who could, in theory, corroborate the existence of this furniture. The stage was set for her claim. She had arrived not with garbage bags, but with the tangible evidence of a settled life. But then, the foundation of her story began to show cracks. The lease, or rather the lack thereof. When Becca presented a document, Judge Judy immediately identified its fatal flaw. This is unsigned, and you say you did not prepare it. The document was a ghost, a piece of paper with no legal weight, its origins murky. Chloe Miller interjected, her voice sharp with accusation. "And you didn't prepare it?" The air crackled with tension. "She gave it to me, Your Honor," Becca insisted, but her credibility was already taking a hit. Judge Judy silenced the brewing conflict with a swift shh, a sound that commanded immediate obedience. She then unearthed a critical detail. "Who's Becca Seidel? That's you?" It was a Facebook name, an online alias, a small thing that suggested a persona, a life lived partially in the digital shadows. This small detail cast a long shadow of doubt. Then came the money. The lifeblood of any rental agreement. Becca claimed she had paid a security deposit and rent in cash. To Judge Judy, this was a glaring red flag. "Well, then I want to see where you got that cash from." Without a paper trail, her claim was built on sand. Judge Judy read aloud from the Facebook messages. "I'm going to the bank in the morning because I don't know how much money I'm going to have in the bank." A statement that spoke of financial precariousness, not of someone ready to hand over hundreds of dollars in untraceable cash. Becca could only produce a check for $600 for the prorated rent, a tiny island of proof in a sea of verbal agreements and vanished cash. "Unfortunately, I don't have any documentation of the rest because it was cash," she admitted, a confession that sounded like a death knell for her financial claims. The security deposit was a ghost, much like the unsigned lease. Now the battle turned to the furniture. Judge Judy, with the skill of a seasoned prosecutor, laid out the digital evidence. The Facebook messages revealed a negotiation, a dance of offers and counter-offers. The defendants had apparently offered her a bed and a dresser. They had discussed a kitchen table. "She did," Becca confirmed, but the context was everything. Was this a generous offer from a landlord, or was it proof that the room was empty, waiting for her to fill it? Chloe Miller vehemently shook her head, her body language screaming denial. "False," she interjected, but was swiftly silenced by Judge Judy's commanding, "Shh, shh." The truth was trapped somewhere between their conflicting memories and the cold, hard text on a screen. Becca, growing desperate, offered, "I actually have a picture, a potential key to unlock the mystery." But Judge Judy dismissed it with a curt, "I'm not interested in your pictures." The witness was the evidence before her, the testimony, the demeanor, the logic of the situation, and then the case exploded. The idyllic, if cheap, new home had been a house of horrors. "There was a kerfuffle," Judge Judy stated, using a deceptively mild word for what was to come. Becca did not hold back. "I have proof of that too." The accusation was staggering. The defendants, Chloe and Brandon Miller, were allegedly selling drugs out of their garage. This was no longer a civil dispute over a kitchen table. It was a criminal allegation that changed the entire complexion of the case. The atmosphere in the courtroom tightened. Judge Judy, displaying a flash of pragmatic fury, shot back, "I wouldn't live any place where people were selling drugs out of the garage." It was a statement of pure, unassailable logic. Why would anyone stay? Becca's answer was a cry of pure financial despair. "I gave her all my money. I didn't have any money to move." She was trapped, a prisoner in a nightmare of her own making, surrounded by what she believed was criminal activity and with no means of escape. Her only recourse was to call the police, a move that would ultimately backfire in the most devastating way possible. The narrative that unfolded was one of escalating chaos. Sleep deprived from the Millers' screaming children, pushed to her absolute limit, Becca and her husband took a drastic and illegal step. "We changed the locks." The admission hung in the air. You cannot simply lock out your landlords, no matter how intolerable the situation. The law was clear, and Becca had broken it. The police were called again, and this time, the tide turned against her. "The police said we had to let them back in, and we complied," she recounted. But the damage was done. The Millers, now armed with a protective order, had the upper hand. In a stunning reversal, Becca Seidel and her family were the ones forced to flee, seeking refuge at her grandmother's house. For 11 agonizing days, the Millers resided in the home, and Becca's belongings, the beds, the kitchen table, the very proof of her initial claim, were locked away in the garage. She was an exile looking in at her own life, held captive behind a simple lock. When Judge Judy questioned what she and her family had slept on during those 11 days they were, paradoxically, both tenants and exiles in the home, Becca's story took on a surreal quality. "The mattresses the police made them return to us," she said, a small temporary victory in a losing war. "They ate from dollar store dishes on the floor, a humbling image of a family brought low." Judge Judy's skepticism reached its peak. She openly challenged Becca's claim that they had hung their own drapes. "Nah, I don't believe that, not in the 2 weeks that you were living there." "No, it was 4 weeks," Becca corrected, but the judge's disbelief was a wall. No, didn't happen." It was a direct, brutal assessment of credibility. Becca's protest, "Yes, it did, Your Honor," sounded feeble against Judge Judy's unwavering conviction. In the end, after the storm of accusations about drug use, filthy living conditions, and threats, Judge Judy found her path through the wreckage. I believe that somewhere in the middle of these two stories, there's truth. Somewhere in the middle. It was a Solomon-like judgment. She couldn't verify the cash, so the security deposit was a lost cause. But the furniture? That was a different matter. Through the tangled web of lies, half-truths, and police reports, a concrete fact emerged. Becca's kitchen table was indeed in the Miller's garage. Her children's beds had been held there. The defendants admitted to having a couple TVs and a bag of garbage, basically, that belonged to Becca. It was a pittance, but it was something. The final ruling was not a victory for either side, but a messy, pragmatic conclusion to a messy, painful chapter. "You have 5 days to retrieve your property. Go there with a police officer." Becca tried to speak, to drag the ugliness of CPS calls and drug allegations back into the light, but Judge Judy had heard enough. That's it, the gavel fell. The story was over, but the bitterness remained, echoing in the hallway as the parties were excused, their angry, overlapping accusations. "She's evil! It was nasty!" A final, discordant chorus to a symphony of distrust and poor decisions. Lesson for the listeners and viewers. This painful saga serves as a stark and vital lesson in the dangers of informal agreements and digital desperation. Never, ever enter into a significant financial and living arrangement based solely on verbal promises or messages on social media. A handshake is not a contract, and a Facebook message is not a lease. Always insist on a signed, written lease that clearly outlines the terms of rent, security deposit, and the condition of the property. For any large payments, especially for something as important as a security deposit, use a method that creates a paper trail, a check, a money order, or a bank transfer. Cash is king only for those who wish to leave no trace. Furthermore, trust your instincts. If a situation feels wrong from the beginning, if the other party seems evasive, or if the deal seems too good to be true, it almost always is. The cheap rent Becca found came at an unimaginably high cost of peace, safety, and stability for her family. Let this be a warning. Protect yourself with paperwork, verify with evidence, and never let desperation cloud your judgment. The convenience of a quick deal is never worth the devastation of a broken home.